Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another lesson of class. This will be lesson 24 through the looking glass, how to create the future. Now, the purpose of the title pretty much came from a couple things. One, my military experience, things that I've learned over time. And then, of course, because we are in art, well, Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass. I mean, think about the Mad Hatter. She did everything to sacrifice just to rescue him from the imprisonment that he was in so that he could remember once again who he was. And then, of course, they have other projects that they call Through the Looking Glass, where you see the future and things like that. Or, you can bend the curvature of time and space, so on and so forth, if you're talking about Einstein's theory, so on and so forth, etc. So I wanted to start bringing elements of science, spirituality, and then combining the creativity and logic because we are in art and putting this all together because I told you I was going to get a little bit more complex, show you more of my personality, come out of my shell a little bit more once again for all you guys. And well, I just want to show you guys that it is possible to not only think better, but do better as well. So let's get into it. The first point I want to talk about when it comes to Through the Looking Glass and how to create the future is, well, you have to eliminate fear. And how do you do that? Well, remember when I talked about reverse engineering, right? If you are a spiritual person, let's say you're a Christian or whatever, you read the Bible, the Quran, or whatever the case may be, and a lot of those books, it talks about how they planned the end from the beginning, right? So how do you do that? Well, that's reverse engineering. You look at the end and then you reverse engineer backwards so that you can plan for everything that might come along the way. In business, this might be known as either fear setting or setting up a SOP, a standard operating procedure. The thing is, the only reason a standard operating procedure, um, the only reason why the SOP works is because of the fact someone took the time to not only look at the future, to see exactly what might happen, but to plan and recover, the areas if things go bad, to prevent bad things from happening, so on and so forth. So if you remember that lesson when it came to fear setting, I talked about Tim Ferriss in that video. It'd be a great one for you to look at because it talks about how to set this up, what to do, and everything like that. Point number two, using technology to better your future. Now that we have so much technology in the world and it upgrades every 3 to 6 months, there is literally no excuse for you not to do something better in this world, to become educated, to become more informed, to read labels on the back of products, medications, and everything else so that you don't fall prey to the side effects or other things that might occur, right? So you can use things like ChatGPT and Google Gemini to ask sophisticated questions. Maybe turn it into somebody by asking it to become or act like someone that you look up to or admire, right? And then or put in a job title and add 30 years of experience to the prompt so that it can go ahead and give you a precise, more correct, specific answer to whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish. Now, point three, using AI to catch up. I got this from Gary Vaynerchuk. And there was a video that he did in Daily V when he talks about all these dudes that are, millionaires and so on and so forth. And when you're a 35 or 30 something year old dude and you finally make it, you can literally catch up to everybody else that already has been, profiting off of money, being, doing insider trading, so on and so forth, and cheating and cutting corners, so on and so forth, because, well, doing things the right way may be difficult, but it's only difficult because people don't take the time to do their research and learn things. So with AI, it increases the speed of execution of, well, the learning process, getting your answers. And, well, let's just face it, the average person does not pay attention to things for longer than 6 to 10 seconds. You can thank social media and all the swiping that goes on there. So if you're able to capture someone's attention for 6 to 10 seconds, that buys you time for another 10 seconds before they might lose interest. So why don't you utilize the tools at hand that are completely free to enhance your abilities, to learn more, to put more money in your pocket with a damn $50 iPhone or $50 phone from Walmart that comes with AI pre-installed. You can literally change your life. So I really don't want to hear any excuses when it comes to that, right? Now, let's go and talk about stealing attention for yourself. right? Because some people just don't have attention. So how do you steal attention, right? Now, Gary Vaynerchuk uses the word arbitrage, which means to, in the financial sense, to buy or sell any commodity, stock, or option at the same time, right? Or trade it at the same time. So I give you money, I get the stock option. Or I give you money, I get to do this, so on and so forth. I pay money to social media or Google, and it brings me brand awareness, clicks, and conversions, so on and so forth. I make this video, and now you have the ability to not only better yourself, but to learn from it and then apply the lessons from class in order to go ahead and better your future, right? And now when it comes to the attention portion, you have to learn AIDA, right? Attraction, interest, desire, and advocacy. That's just the basic marketing thing, but it does work with everything, right? You have to develop attention. You have to get people's interest. You have to create a desire so that they could carry out an action, and then make sure that they love it so much that they become an advocate, meaning not only do they keep coming back to you, but they tell other people about what it is that you do. So, how do we do this? Well, you can leverage a couple things in this world. And one of the things that you can leverage is, well, beauty. As you can see, I'm at a park. It's very nice. I have, trees in the background. I have people driving around, etc. Whether they're being nosy or not, because I left a lot of room for them to park, but they always want to park near me. It's one of those things. You could sit in a movie theater in an empty row, and because people's natural instinct is to gather together to increase their survival rate, you will literally get somebody to sit right next to you, and you're like, you had all this space, but yet you chose to sit next to me. Let's have a conversation, right? Because the only reason you're sitting next to me is because you thought it would increase your survivability, right? You thought it would be safer, etc., so on and so forth. May not think that consciously, but unconsciously, thanks to hunter and gatherer times, it's a natural thing that we do subconsciously. Now, you can take advantage of that, right? Maybe you have uh, an attractive facial feature, so on and so forth. If you're a male, if maybe you have muscles, etc., so you dress up and you look good, and then all of a sudden you realize, due to proximity awareness, people slowly start to gravitate into your different zones, right? And I'll get into that later when we move into science and the psychology of situational awareness and proximity awareness, right? Because people who want to eventually speak to you or talk to you or be around you will tend to start to gravitate towards you unconsciously, hoping to look for the opening to speak to you or get the chance to do so. Now, you can take advantage of that and start the conversation, or just wait for them to do that on their own, but that would be up to you. Now, let's talk about if you're a female. Most females are beautiful. They have a lot of interest. They dress up, they do their nails, they do their eyebrows, they have makeup, they have dresses, they have purses, etc. Then they take that and they put it on social media and they gather attention. Oh my God, I love your dress. Great, I got it from this place. You should go check it out. Here's 10% off. Now they get a cut of that, so on and so forth, right? Do you understand how easy that is? It sounds easy. Yes, it's easier said than done, because what's happening here is the fear factor is kicking in. Not fear of success or failure, but the fear to go speak to another individual because you're used to speaking and watching or texting people, so on and so forth, right? The desensitization of, well, community is happening. The dismantling of family members, etc., or families, I should say, is happening. People are not communicating as much as they used to, um, effectively, as they say. So you can utilize beauty. That's one aspect, right? If you own a nightclub, you could make it extremely nice, or you could turn it into a dive bar. If you own a business or an apartment complex, make sure that the interior, the apartment itself, the outside may need some work, but as long as the inside looks amazing, it's beautiful, it makes people want to be there, right? Same thing for those of you who are calling people back into the office after remote work. Do they even want to be in the office? Does the office look crappy? Is it boring there, or is it interesting? Do people conversate? Do you hand out free beer and wine like WeWork does, so on and so forth, so that at the end of the day people could, have a drink, socialize, etc. Now, these are little things, but people appreciate that, right? The next thing you want to do is talk about placement, because there's always a time and place for everything, right? Now, placement goes into marketing. However, when it comes to meeting the two, there's a thing that I think it was Will Smith that said it, and it said, Success happens when luck meets preparation. I think that's the way it goes. Because yes, it does take luck to succeed in the world. However, you also have to be prepared for when you do get lucky to meet that individual that might change your life. Because if you're not prepared, then the individual might leave and you won't know what happened. And you're going to stand there, like in the movie Hitch, when he found out that his girlfriend was cheating on him and he was in the rain crying. And he's like, "What did I do? What did I do that was so wrong?" And the guy looked at him and said, "You're doing it right now." And I took from that he looked too desperate, right? He looked like he needed this person, right? But at the end of the day, we all need someone. We may want a lot of things, but we need certain things from certain people, whether that is a good conversation, someone to cry on a shoulder, someone to, speak to or be intimate with, etc. So you create, the 5 people that you hang around by choosing whom you want to hang around. Remember, the 5 people that you hang around could also be considered your family, right? Because as you grow, you get to decide who's a part of your family. Blood does not make you family, and I learned that one the hard way growing up, not only in New York and seeing my father with his friends, but and my mother with hers, so on and so forth, but also going to the military and then seeing, well, we're not blood, but I'd take a bullet for you, so on and so forth. I'd jump on a grenade for you, etc., to save your life, and you would probably do the same for me. Now, that developed a different relationship. Some people might call that crazy, some people might call it love. So, think about that when you're talking about or you're planning on doing something like, well, applying beauty, aesthetics, so on and so forth. Because remember, presentation is 9/10 of the law. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it might be a duck. Keyword, might be a duck. You never know who's impersonating something and who might be a real one. So you have to decipher. But then again, it also comes down to time and place. And if you do not know or understand the time and place, by all means, go ask AI to educate you on these things. It's completely free. All you need is a Google account or email address to whatever to sign up for things like ChatGPT, Google Gemini, and so much more. So, now that we talked about leveraging things like beauty, vanity, placement, so on and so forth, etc., let's talk about things like art, right? And what makes it valuable, right? Because when it comes to art, it's not just the paint that's used, it's not just the digital designer that created the thing, it's not just the, the brush that was used or the pencil or the paper, etc. It also has to deal with a story, right? Now, why do you need a story? The reason you need a story is because a story brings together the elements of creativity and logic in an artistic format in order to communicate a message to another individual utilizing specific keywords, terms, and vocabulary that will speak to an audience that you are trying to attract. So if you're watching this and you're thinking about, well, I want to go on social media, I want to start a business, I want to do this, blah, 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 learn your terminology. Look at the people that you speak to and try to change the vocabulary and see if they can still follow the conversation or if they ask questions. If they ask questions, keep them around because they're willing to learn and they're willing to understand instead of listening to respond. Remember this from Stephen Covey's book, Highly Effective People. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, one of those things, besides using someone's name when you're speaking to them, is to listen to understand instead of listening to respond. Most people are so strung out throughout the day, whether it's work, taking care of the family, taking care of the house, doing the car, taking out the trash, doing the dishes, blah, 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 right? They never slow down in their conversation when they're speaking to somebody that they say that they care about. If they're in a distraught states, right? Because negativity always outweighs positivity. So what happens is they'll take that negativity and just throw it into the conversation. And then what happens? You're talking to them and they just listen to respond. So they say the wrong thing. And then all of a sudden they have to backtrack and say, I didn't say that. Or what did you say again? Or what? 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 And it comes off as though they don't know what you're saying. They do know what you're saying, but you didn't use the vocabulary that they understood or that they wanted to hear. So they're either giving you a chance to say it again, which is most times, or they weren't paying attention at all and they're just choosing to respond because when people say you're not paying attention, it really translates to you're not understanding the words coming out of my mouth. Now, if you've seen Rush Hour, what's it called, with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, there's a part where Chris Tucker is literally getting fed up with Jackie Chan. He's getting frustrated. He goes, "Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?" And he goes, and Jackie Chan just smiles and he's nodding. But it's a benefit to him because of the role that they played in, right? They were undercover detectives. If Jackie Chan came out and just started speaking English, yes, I understand, blah, 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 but nobody's supposed to know, and explain that whole thing. Anybody who is listening, whether it be through a Bluetooth device or something else, or a long distance boom mic, so on and so forth, or a satellite gun that will go ahead and pick up vocals and audio from long distances, whatever the case may be, he would not be able to give that away, or else people would pick up on it and then it would be used against him, because that's what happens, right? Now, when it comes to the story, if you remember the movie The Titanic, there was a blue diamond in there. Now, there's nothing special about the blue sapphire stone. Sorry, I said diamond. The blue sapphire stone, gemstone. However, the story that was attached to it made the stone priceless. Just like, what is it? I think it's called the Star of Africa. I saw this in the TV show Hustle, right? It's a BBC show about a motley crew of con men who go around conning criminals and really, really bad people who do things to other people to see if they could take it as well as dish it. And one of those episodes was, well, they were stealing the crown jewels. Another one was these two guys that ended up stealing an idea from a gentleman, and he ended up committing suicide. So they decided to take these people on as a client, since they thought that they could get away with this and not give a payout to the grieving spouse of the individual that created the very thing that they profited off of, right? So imagine this, you come up with an idea, somebody steals it, etc., then fires you, gives you no credit, no money, no nothing, leaves you with completely broke, and now you have a family to take care of. All that stuff, all that sacrifice and everything built up to this guy jumping off a building. Now, Mickey Bricks in the show, who's the main character, has a high, how do I say this? Has a has a point where if there's a line that is crossed, he will step in along with Albert and the rest of the team. But they go after very bad people, not the people that can't afford it. In other words, if you're a criminal going after good people, you got karma coming your way from either those in the same community or other people that are like this motley crew. Now, when you're talking about other things and the story, when it comes to the Titanic, the blue gemstone would be, let's say, a couple $1,000,000 or a couple $100,000, whatever the case may be. But when the story gets attached to the gemstone of the Titanic and the love and this and that and the third, all of a sudden it becomes priceless and people are willing to pay anything for it. In the show Hustle, they stole the Star of Africa and did something known as the Mona Lisa Con, where they created synthetic diamonds, replicas of the Star of what's it called, Africa, which was a huge diamond. It was like the size of my palm, right? So imagine a diamond this big, it looked like a baseball. Everybody thought that the diamond was stolen. So the story that they pitched to the people that were purchasing the quote unquote stolen diamond was that, well, they're going to announce that this was stolen. They're going to put a fake replica on display so that the people do not panic, etc. But just know that this is not only an authentic piece, but here's a picture of one of us in the room stealing the diamond at the moment, so on and so forth. So you cannot make it up, which means they were able to get top dollar for a synthetic diamond that cost way less than what the real diamond cost. Now, after they made the sale, they finally alerted authorities, and they realized that literally in a coffee can that belonged to one of the housekeepers, or I should say the groundskeepers, the diamond was in there, and the diamond was never stolen. It's like the movie Thomas Crown Affair. They thought that the painting was stolen, and then at the end you realize the painting was never stolen to begin with, and it was there the whole time. But it's the story that brings the value, and the same thing happens with everything else, right? So let's move forward. Why words matter just as much as image, and why video is king? Well, words matter to a certain extent. Right here we have April Taxi. Doesn't mean anything. If we were in April and they had a discount, then April Taxi would probably be, be profitable and, make a lot of money because people will cash in on the discount. Whereas when it comes to other things, if you're trying to sell yourself online, if you're trying to develop relationships or friends or whatever the case may be, you need more than just a picture, right? Because a picture doesn't capture audio, right? So you have to tell the story for the picture. The words do not bring imagery, so you have to add imagery to the words. This is why books get converted to movies, right? Think Harry Potter, right? So this is why video is king, because why? You can now manipulate and play with tone, pitch, how the actors are presenting themselves, human behavior, posturing, and so much more to not only get the story across to the other individual, but to create the story in one's own imagination and mind, just like a book does or just like a picture does. But putting the two together and adding motion creates a beautiful imagery that brings people into another world, right? So people may sound the same, but use different words. So, for instance, if I said, hey, I needed some headlines and I needed some words to describe what we're selling, etc., that's very basic, right? But if I wanted to sound educated, right, or like I specialize in a field within business like marketing, I would say, hey, I need copy specifically for a headline. Now, I want to make sure that this headline has a strategic call to action or a CTA, and within the body and the script within the body for that copy, I want you to discuss the product or service in a way that's exciting. Now, you can do this yourself, or you can utilize AI to assist you with this, so on and so forth, because remember, we're trying to help you create your future and to not only think better, but create a better one as well. So you can do all these things and more, right? And then when it comes to, well, I need some pictures and videos to help out with this. If I wanted to translate into the marketing language, I would say, well, I need copy and creative for this thing. I need a static image, I need a video image, I need a GIF, so on and so forth, or a GIF because I need motion, but I want to see if people pay attention to the video, how long they spend on that video. And if that doesn't work, maybe we capture just enough attention where we can make maybe the text move in a GIF and capture their attention so they can look at the imagery and then read the copy that's either in the image or in the body or the headline and then pick it up from there. So yes, people do say the same thing, they just mean different things. If you remember my explanation on the medical community, a doctor could come in and say, we got to perform cardiac bypass or we got to do heart surgery. Both stating the same thing, but one is more simplified. When you start to add different vocabulary, it does something to the brain. If you don't know or understand the vocabulary, it does a lot of things actually. So, one, if you don't know what someone is saying, you can't take offense to it. So you're more inclined to just be more neutral during the conversation, as well as try to pay attention during the conversation because you're trying to understand what the person is saying. And if you don't ask any questions, then you'll be lost in the sauce. If you think you know everything because you're arrogant or whatever the case may be, and you do not want to ask questions, well, you're just showing a lack of interest. And a lack of interest doesn't get anybody anywhere. It just shows more of whom your character is and how you like to play the game of life. So let's get into it further, right? Let's talk about mathematics. Let's talk about science. Let's talk about other things, right? There are words that sound the same, that are spelled the same, but are not said the same way, right? So let's think about this. You have the word sin, right? The word sin is spelled SIN, right? But in mathematics, that is sine. You remember sine, cosine, tangent, right? Geometry, calculus, etc. But it's spelled like sin. So why isn't it said that way? Well, because it stands for something else in a different vernacular, in a different field and industry. And without the understanding, you won't know what the hell the person is saying. You might think that they're trying to tell you that you're a sinner and a bad person, so on and so forth. And it's, or we're looking for a bad thing. No, in mathematics, the sign is completely different. It's literally something you're looking for, but it's pertaining to something else. So let's put it all together, right? Moving forward here. Now, moving forward, when I'm talking about a story and everything else, you also have to understand that people are as intelligent as they want to be, right? And what do I mean by this? My mother has a saying where people are where they want to be, which is not necessarily always true. However, people are as intelligent as they want to be because we have so many free things on the internet that can educate you, that can teach you things so that you don't get lost in the sauce, so that you can better yourself, so on and so forth, that it really does remove the excuses. So, you are kind of where you want to be, but if you ask this question to, let's say, ChatGPT on how you could change your life and, do it the right way when it comes to prompting, you might get a little bit further, right? But you have to express that free will. You have to actually waste energy typing. I know it's so hard, but let's talk about storytelling and putting it together, right? When it comes to value, right? If I were to, let me see if I have one here. I don't. Normally I carry cash, but I didn't this time. If I were to show you a dollar bill, I would ask you, what about this dollar bill is valuable? Now, I did this experiment with a couple people. And the reason why it works is because of the perception in the mind of individuals in the story that they were told, right? Now, I took the dollar bill and I folded it so that it could stand, and I placed it in front of somebody with the back facing to them. And I said, what makes this valuable, or is it valuable? And the first thing the person said was, I don't care about God. I don't give a shit about it, so on and so forth, etc. I was like, there are so many things on the back of a dollar bill. And the one thing that you decided to focus on first, you thought, what, you would offend me? Or you're just telling me exactly who you are. So just be honest. I said, okay, let's try this again. So I turned the dollar bill around. And as you know, on the front of a dollar bill is President George Washington. And I pointed at it again and I said, what about this is valuable? Is it valuable to you? He said, I don't care about it, so on and so forth. It's not valuable, blah, 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 blah. So I ended it right there because clearly he was just trying to push buttons or trying to get upset. I have no idea. Maybe he was having a bad day. But I decided to end it and say, well, if it's not valuable, can I have all your cash since you don't care about it? I got him to think a little bit, but it was different. He goes, why would I give you my cash? I said, you just said you don't care about it. You don't care about the text or the words. You don't care about the imagery. You don't care that the president's on the front of it. You don't care that it's worth something. You could trade it for something else. To you, it's worthless. So why not give it to somebody else? And he was like, no, I need it. Do you need it? If you needed it, then you would care about it, right? And if you cared about it, you would be more diligent with it. Now, here's the thing. The reason why he probably didn't care about it was because it was a dollar bill. It's very easy to come by a dollar bill. Hell, you could get 4 quarters together and make a dollar bill, or 100 pennies, whatever the case may be. Now, here's the great part of a story. I did this experiment with someone else, and I said, if I added 2 zeros to that, would it be worth more? And the person thought about it, and they asked a very specific question. They said, what do you mean? Adding 2 zeros to a $1 bill, or adding 2 zeros to make it an $100? And I was like, that is the type of person I'm looking for, right? It's critical thinking, right? It's something that people don't do these days because common sense went out the window, attention span sucks, so on and so forth. And then I went a step further. I said, you're the first person that actually said the correct thing. I said, so let me ask you a question. What do you think is more valuable, the president or an intelligent person? What do you think people value more? A president, a puppet, a person, a POTUS, whatever the case may be, the person that sits at the top of the totem pole? Remember, the cherry tree got chopped down just like it. So what's more important, the thing at the top that everything's looking at that's very common, so on and so forth, or the intelligence that it took to get to a place like that, right? Because if you look at US currency, we have the president on a couple bills, right? Especially on the $1 bill. But on the $100 bill, we have Benjamin Franklin, a founding father, Freemason, so on and so forth, etc. But he was not a president. So that just told me that in America, we value intelligent people. We value people with not education. I'm talking about intelligence. You can be street smarts. You can do graffiti. You could be a mechanic. You can be a chess player. You can be a teacher, so on and so forth. And don't give me this crap that teachers don't make a lot of money. Teachers choose not to make a lot of money, because if a teacher wanted to make a lot of money, they can do something online that would supplement the extra income that they're missing out on with the technology that we have today, right? They would go ahead and start a tutoring program with courses in there that are pre-recorded that people can go into and then get educated and maybe charge them, let's say, $20 a month for 20 bucks per lesson or 20 bucks per session or whatever the case may be, right? Or they could just sell the whole program for 100 bucks, sell it to as many people as possible, because remember the rule of 1%. Out of the 300 million people in the United States alone, you only need 1% to change your life. So if you were to take $100 that people would pay for your product for, especially if they're needing tutoring in topics like math, language, science, etc., then multiply that by the 1%, not the 1% of 300 million, but take 1% from 300 million. What do you have? 10% is 30 million. So let's talk about 3 million people times 100. You're now a millionaire, and you could be a public school teacher like my best friend Jessica is, who's now best friends with my sister. For some reason, my sister, all my friends are now friends with my sister. It's so weird. It's like they just left me because she's the cool kid now. I think it's because of the baby, but that's a whole other story. So, you have to think about things before you express yourself, before you understand that it's not just about the dollars. The dollars have to make sense. Your words have to make sense. The imagery in the video has to make sense, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Gems versus gold versus ore, which is more valuable, right? And when I'm talking about ore, I'm spelling it O-R-E, right? So it really depends on what you're using it for, what you want it for, and then how it's being positioned and placed in front of you. Gemstones in the romance world or the luxury world get put on jewelry, but in the scientific world, it's used for other things, right? Same thing with gold. Gold is a little bit more versatile. It's more malleable. It's better at conducting electricity than silver, so on and so forth. It lasts longer. All these things, and it's also known as a jewelry piece, etc. And it's also used to, well, as a form of currency, just in case the dollar bill or whatever paper currency or fiat currency that you're using does no longer applies. It can be used as a form of currency. But let's talk about ore. Gold is a type of ore. However, so is titanium, and so is graphite, right? Or graphene, right? Which comes from graphite, which goes into a pencil, which has the words to be on it, which everybody actually uses. That comes from William Shakespeare, to be or not to be. And it's written on a pencil since the day one that you go to school. And that's how you do the scantrons. If you remember the little bubbles that you used to do when you're taking a test, you got to use a number 2 pencil, so on and so forth. So if you want to play a trick on somebody, tell them to go to the store and buy a number 1 pencil or a number 3 pencil for their exam and see if they show up with a number 1 or a number 3 pencil. That would be hilarious. But when it comes to the story, and it comes to the needs or wants, you have to understand, well, it really depends on that timing, right? And the placement and the positioning that makes that thing valuable, on top of the story that comes with it, which is why, what is it, Jared's Jewelers or K Jewelers, right? McDonald's, when they talk about, we love to see you smile, etc., right? Or a diamond is a girl's best friend, etc., talking about gemstones, making it more valuable, etc. So you really have to look at the supply and the demand. See, value depends on your needs, not your wants. And in life, if you study Tony Robbins, you get your needs, not your wants. If you want something, you're going to have to work a little bit harder for it. But if you need something, somehow, some which way, shape, or form, the universe, the creator, whatever you want to call it, decides, okay, we got to find a way to provide it to this person because they actually need it, so on and so forth, etc. So have that, process that for a second. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. So point 13, how to protect yourself in case of an uh-oh, right? This is where I talked about fear setting, right? So if you remember the fear setting thing, you got a column of everything that can go wrong, a column that goes right next to it in the middle of ways you can prevent it, and then the last column are ways to recover if it does go south, so on and so forth. So the speed of execution and recovery are a lot faster than the person without a plan or strategy, if that makes sense. Now, when it comes to competition and how to avoid it unless necessary, well, let's talk about, well, and mention a blue ocean strategy. Everybody likes to copy everybody else. That's not something that's new, right? Some people like to regurgitate, or as Candace Owens likes to say, they like to parrot, so on and so forth, etc. Or regurgitate what other people are saying, similar to the movie Good Will Hunting, where the gentleman gets called out in the bar scene by Matt Damon. Now, if you want to combine this and create a successful thing in your life, you have to remember the rule of 1% in business, along with the blue ocean strategy. A red ocean is just, I'm going to create a phone. Well, there's a bunch of phones out there. I'm going to create a phone so that I can make money and sell it, but the phone matches up with everything that everybody else has. Versus, I'm going to create a phone that people can also use as a laptop so they don't have to spend so much money on a laptop. They can literally use this phone, and then I'm going to sell accessories like a mini projector that connects to the cell phone, that can project onto a wall or a screen or whatever the case. So let's say you're sitting at a Starbucks and you're looking at the wall, you can project your screen onto the wall, making it whatever size you need to. And then I'm going to sell a little portable keyboard that people can utilize to bring that in. Now, I think a plane is passing by, so if you hear any noise, that would be the plane and everything else that's going on right now. So remember the 1% rule, right? So with the 1% rule, all it means really is the rule of 1%. Out of the billions of people, you only need 1% to become a millionaire, to change your life, really. Even if you were to go ahead and sell something for $1 around the world, let's just use the United States. Let's not go that far. $1 for around the world. There's 300 million people in the United States. If you could get 1% to buy, you still have $3 million. And then after taxes, you have about 1.5 million. So you're still a millionaire, right? So remember the rule of 1% and the probability and statistics and why they matter, because this is how you get people to understand things, to calculate things correctly, and not gamble with things that they shouldn't, and have them understand how to win. In economics, it's called an optimal decision or a win-win scenario, right? Point 17. So, why energy makes sense in survival and self-preservation for not only the earth but humanity, right? Well, when it comes to energy, and you'll hear people like Marie Forleo, Mel Robbins, Lewis Howes, and all these people, including Jocko Willink, who was a freaking fucking Navy SEAL. Excuse my language. I was a Marine, but I've worked out like 2, 3 times with those guys. They are on a whole other level, and they could keep their job, quite honestly. Then again, they'd also tell me that I could keep mine because I played with bombs and explosives, but that's a whole other story. But they can definitely keep their job. But when it comes to energy and things like this, haven't you noticed when people give you negative energy, you just want to get away? Right? The same thing applies to, well, if you look at history, the Earth, or I should say, the landmass started off as a Pangea, if I'm pronouncing that or enunciating it correctly, right? But then, of course, there were fissures, the tectonic plates, created earthquakes, and things broke apart or whatever. That energy separated everything, right? Why did that happen? Well, you need a positive and negative, so on and so forth, or one force responding to another force in order to create an action, right? Because every action has an opposite to equal reaction, right? So the earthquakes translated to breaking apart the Pangea, giving more space, diversity, and everything else for people, right? In order to have their own territories. That you have Africa that belongs to people. You have Europe that belongs to people. You have Russia so that people can stay in Russia. You have the Antarctic, so on and so forth, etc. The United States, Canada, South America, and all these other places where people have their own little slice of heaven. Now, I don't like to think about coincidences. I'm a magician. I've been a magician for more than 20 years. So when it comes to coincidences, I don't necessarily believe that a coincidence just occurs out of nothing, right? Once something happens more than once, I'm like, okay, I gotta say, this is really good. I'm gonna start really trying to enjoy this. I'm just making sure that I can trust somebody, because coming from where I came from, growing up the way I did, I didn't trust a lot of people. A lot of people crossed me, family members, etc. whether it be personal family members, people that I invited to my circle that screwed me over later, whatever the case may be. They became a cross, you know. And I had to learn along the way. And then when I got to experience Charlotte, North Carolina, and the shady side, it was something that didn't rub me the right way. Yes, I hung out with criminals. I've hung out with straight people. I hung out with law enforcement. I hung out with gay people. I hung out with LGBTQ people. I hung out with special forces and operations people. I hung out with regular civilians. Now, it really comes down to the mindset, the way that they're groomed, and the way that things are structured in their life and what they're told, or whatever story they're told on how to treat another individual based upon, well, social proof, psychology, sociology, so on and so forth. Because remember, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, you might respect it and say, wah, wah, to try to talk to it. However, most people do not look beyond nor ask questions. If somebody came out in a white coat at a hospital dressed normally with a stethoscope around their neck, so on and so forth, etc., started talking to you, you would assume that they were a doctor or they belonged there. Now, that is just social engineering at its finest, but con artists use this as well. And I got to experience the bad con artists, so on and so forth. Because as I said, not only did I do magic, but I used to consult sometimes while I was in the military, and I also worked at the Magic. Well, I didn't work at the Magic Castle. I used to go to the Magic Castle and just answer a lot of questions for people that came from different walks of life that would come up to me, and my friends that were other magicians there, and they would say, I got a great idea for a magic trick. Or I had this idea. Do you think it would work? Or if they were a gambler, do you think this would get the money? If you know who Richard Turner is, he is a legally blind magician he's known as a mechanic. In the magic world, mechanics can do anything with cards, sleights of hand. It's not an actual mechanic that works on a car. That's something completely different. This is what I mean, that when I say people do say and use the same words but mean different things, right? If I'm talking about magic and I say mechanic, it could be somebody who's good at cheating at cards. But if I'm talking about a vehicle and I say mechanic, it's somebody who works on a vehicle. So think about that as far as food for thought and how energy can affect everything, not just your environment, the earth, but people as well. Because, well, when you're in negative or positive environment, you either want to stay there or get away. People are always moving towards something or away from it, depending on the situation. Now, why should you think better, not just different? Well, Apple had the great movement of thinking different, which created individuality, and it was spectacular, so on and so forth, etc. But then something happened after a decade, and Steve Jobs passed away. And one of those things is lack of creativity. I mean, it went from creativity to profitability, right? So they didn't really make any upgrades, right? Because the new iPhone 16 that they're selling for $1,600, the thing that they advertised was the use of artificial intelligence on the phone that was pretty much Siri on steroids. Whereas now you can literally go to Walmart and get a $50 Android phone that comes with Google Gemini. So it's the same thing. So where's the value, right? Oh, there is no value for the end consumer. There's only value for you and your profiteering, because what did you do? You changed the port to charge the phone, so it forced everybody to get new accessories. You added something else that would force people to do stuff because they created an emotional bond with this technology and device. And it's a dirty practice, but it's a legal one because they have to answer to the stock market, right? Whereas Steve Jobs relied more on other things, such as thinking better, right? He added color to differentiate things in the tech space, right? When people said, I want the blue computer or the pink one or the purple one, etc., they knew they were talking about an Apple product because they were able to identify it by color, because at the time, all major computer companies such as Microsoft, etc., were pretty much dull and bland, right? They were beige or white or black, like IBM laptops or Lenovo or whatever. Whereas he added color, creativity, and allowed people to express themselves without verbally expressing themselves, right? In other words, another way to use the First Amendment, right? Freedom of speech. And that comes in a variety of ways. So, what are some of the cons? Okay, how do I say this? What are some of the cons of thinking different? Does it get you very far? Well, everyone thinks the same and they have seen it already. Two, it's not that creative, right? Three, it hinders creativity and creates division. What do I mean by this? Well, as I explained earlier, Steve Jobs added color to the PC, to the computer, so on and so forth, so people were able to do that. But then it created individuality, keeping up with the Joneses, and that kept you broke, so on and so forth. So if I pulled up in a nice car and somebody wanted to fit in with the Joneses, they would go ahead, sell their car, buy a new one, so they could either fit in or say that they got something better. Now, I'm down to the last 2 points here, and I'm going to wrap this up real quick. So I want you to remember this. It's called the Pareto principle. It's the 80-20 rule. In any work environment or any society, there is about 20% of people that are doing majority of the work, and the other 80% are pretty much lackadaisical. So if you think about everything that's going on right now with Doge and people getting fired and things like that, well, they're more than likely firing the 80% of people that aren't putting in as much work as the 20%. Now, what does this mean for everybody else? Well, based upon psychology, if you go around non-productive people, it has been proven that it will reduce your ability to be productive by at least 30% or more. However, if you were to take that same individual and put them around high performers and productive people, their efficiency and everything else will increase as well. You just have to get rid of the negativity and add more positive people that want to do things in the world, right? So remember the 80-20 principle. Things are different and backwards in business when finances are involved. So personal finance, you have your debits and credits. Now, when they credit your account, that means money's going into it, right? Whereas in business, if you have a credit, that's actually a negative thing, right? And a debit is a positive thing. And personal finance, a debt or debit is a negative thing and a credit is a good thing. So you have to understand that. And if you don't, you're going to get lost in the sauce when it comes to doing your taxes and you submit your balance sheet, income statement, and profit loss statement, which are the 3 pieces of paperwork that you also need to get a business loan or to work with a bank, so on and so forth, etc., and to establish yourself either as an LLC or as an S Corp, etc. The last point that I want to make here is connection and making connections work like a network does, similar to like a net, right? So the way a network would work is you create a Google email address, then you go onto YouTube, so on and so forth, and you look at a couple videos. What does this do? Google acts as a net. You now identified yourself with your email address. It acts as a net. So everything you research on that thing, it catches, right? You might know this as a cookie, whether it's a first-person cookie or a third-party cookie. Now, this thing will catch it, hold on to it, and then it will put more stuff similar to the things that you are interested in when it comes to whatever it is that you are researching. So think about this, and I'll leave you with this. If everything is connected and there is a string that leads to where you want to go, like a thread that pieces everything together, but you need, let me rewind because I have a lot of traffic here and I got people pulling in and I got this guy that wants to park. So let me speed this up real quick. If everything is connected, then there is a string that leads you to where you want to go, right? So if you look at a web, so on and so forth, etc., you're going to see that the string is connected to the rest of the web and it'll probably eventually lead you to where you want to go. Now, this is the end of class. Remember, class stands for everything you're supposed to learn in life before you get out there. So creativity, logic, art, science, and spirituality makes the acronym CLASS, which is why I guess people go to school to learn how to make it in the world. But if you know me, I am not going to do the connection as far as the number, so on and so forth. We are on lesson 24. I thoroughly hope that you enjoyed this. It's now up to you to not only create your future, but to see how the number 24 and everything else in this lesson connects to the things in your life. So until the next lesson, my friends, take care, God bless, and have a great freaking day. Mwah.